Retirement is often seen as a destination, but we believe it's an opportunity to pursue your passions, realize your dreams, and live a purposeful life. Great decisions, incredible lives. Retire with Intention podcast is about more than just money. It's about embracing the things that truly matter, the experiences, the relationships, and the impact you leave behind. Here is your host, John Creekmur.
Hey, welcome to another edition of Great Decisions, Incredible Lives. And this is John Creekmur, and I'll tell you what, we are with you again this week and just kind of walking through how do we make good decisions? How do we expose ourselves to different ways of thinking? How do we really live that incredible life you've always wanted to live? And I have been so blessed just with the feedback that everyone has been giving us. Thank you so much, not just for listening, but for really being interactive and for giving us comments and for really speaking into things, for connecting with different guests we've had on the show, and just for really kind of finding different ways to really grow yourself, to grow your mind, to live an incredible life. And today, I'll tell you what, I am so excited to be introducing you all to a new friend of mine, Jenell Jones. And I'll tell you what, this has been an episode I've been thinking about for the last number of weeks. And just with Jenell's background and with what she does, I know it's going to open up a lot of y'all's thinking to a lot of different ways to consider things, especially as you're starting to say, hey, what's next for me? And so, Jenell, I'll tell you what, Jenell, I'm just going to say, hey, can you take a second, introduce yourself, your background, and what do you do? And then we'll kind of hop into the interview.
John, and thank you so much for having me. I love talking about this lifestyle of mine because it is a little different for the mainstream. But then when you get into this lifestyle, you realize it's not that different. I worked for the government for many years and had to live in the county that I worked in. They wanted you to. And so I didn't have a chance to move around a lot and travel a lot. I went to Europe like everybody else does, but I realized in my traveling that I wanted to take my home with me. So I enjoy traveling, but I also enjoy being home. So how does those two meet? It's called an RV. I live and work out of my RV and have been full-time for 4.5 years now.
Wow. So you retired from your job with the government and you said, hey, let's travel a while. But then all of a sudden it's like, maybe not travel outside of the U.S., but travel domestically to see all the incredible things here. So before that period of time, had you spent much time in an RV? Was that something maybe on the weekends you would do, or as far as in summer trips? Or is this something all of a sudden just came to you at this next stage of life?
John, I had never been in an RV in my life. My family didn't have one. I've never rented one. I had no idea. But at my job, across the street was a Prevost dealer. And the Prevost, for our listeners, is like a bus. And back then, 15, 20 years ago, those were $1 million. So you can imagine the price of now. So as I sat there looking out the window and watching, I would see people putting their stuff in, taking their stuff out, driving off. And I'm like, I wonder what that is like. And that put that little seed way in the back of my mind. When I retired, I packed one huge suitcase of warm clothes and one huge suitcase of cold clothes. I sold my house, put everything I owned in storage because I knew there was a next big step. I just didn't know what it looked like yet. So I traveled, like I said, through Europe because, everybody goes to Europe when you have some money and time. Let's go to Europe. And like I said earlier, while I was there, I realized I wanted to travel, but I wanted my home. So it's funny. I didn't talk to a travel agent. I called my financial advisor. I called and I started talking to him and said, crazy idea. And he's like, not another one. Because I'd called him over the years. I'm going to invest in this. Give me some of my money. And thankfully, he said no a lot. But I did. I had long conversations with him on what does this look like? Do I have the money? How do I do this? So I want to say that you and I coming together is kismet because I made what seemed to be a crazy decision, but turned out to be a great decision. And I truly do live an incredible life right now.
Yeah, I'll tell you, that's a great story, a great testimony as far as how you got here. And a lot of people would say, this is kind of crazy. You're going to sell your house and you're going to live out of your RV and travel around. And yet that has allowed you to first of all, see a lot of amazing things, so many things in this country to be able to see, to experience people and experience life in a different way that so many folks really have never seen and done before. Now, you had talked about just that relationship with your financial advisor. And so
Yes.
all of a sudden, most people, they're used to living in a certain location in their house, in their apartment, in their condo. They work their entire lives. And then all of a sudden, then they retire. And it's like, I think I want to pick up and do this RV lifestyle. And maybe it's
Yes.
full time, maybe it's part time. And I'll tell you, we have a growing number of clients at our wealth advisory firm that are actually taking a similar route to what you have taken. And so you had mentioned again working with your financial advisor. Kind of walk through a little bit as far as what things should people be asking themselves, let's even say financially, if they're considering making one of these transitions, just like you made.
Well, and that's what he did for me. He was able to help me see outside of, oh, I'm going to get to go to all these great places. He was able to help me see, all right, let's talk about some reality here. Let's talk about some money. Let's talk about the depreciation of an RV. His
Mm-hmm.
suggestion, which I didn't like at the time, but he was right, and I'm glad I took it. He said, why don't I buy a lower end RV, keep my house that I'd bought another house by this
Mm-hmm.
time, by the time I got back from Europe, because you're supposed to buy a house, right? That's how we're raised. Let's buy a house. It's the American dream. So I bought another house. But anyway, he said, why don't you get an RV, lower end RV, travel around for a little while, see how you like it. That way you can resell it quickly and easily, buy used. I did everything he said, traveled for 24 months. Out of the 24 months, I was at my house for the months to check on my house. So towards about the year and a half, I checked in with him regularly because I considered him my friend as well. And so I said, I think I'm going to do this. I like this. We kept very careful track of my money. That's what he had told me to do. Write down every dime you spend on that RV, and expenses and attractions and events and tires and oil and gas. Gas is my major issue
Mm-hmm.
here, my major expense here. But in the end, he and I both agreed. This man, I don't even he and I both agreed that I could do this lifestyle. I could do it easily. And as a matter of fact, it was a cost effective way for me to live as well. You guys always tell us to build wealth. Well,
Mm-hmm.
he and I reversed that and was like, let's don't do anything let's reduce your expenses, because I'm not going to go work and do my 60 hours a week anymore. So he and
Mm-hmm.
I set up ways, what does it look like to reduce some of my expenses? And that was a great change in my life, my mindset, and living this life. It kind of gave me permission in my head to have this life.
Hmm. I'll tell you what, that's really such a great story. One of those principles of creating true wealth that we really talk about here is to be open to wise counselors. And it's one of the things that you really spoke to well, that you have your counselor as far as on the financial side that you got together with, and he gave you some counsel or advice that looking back on, is probably wise advice, quite honestly, but you didn't want to hear it right away. And
Right.
so, right? And so, but you were open to that, and then you followed that advice. You thought through it logically, you processed it,
Yes.
you considered different things, and then you made a decision. But then you didn't stop evaluating. You kept on looking at the expenses. You kept on looking at as far as what it was like in the lifestyle, and then you made the next decision. And so I think that's just a great way for folks to look through it. And if they don't have a financial advisor or they don't have some wise counsel they can talk to, they need to sit down and talk to someone to help balance out some of their processes. Sometimes all of a sudden we get so caught up just in the emotion or the joy of something new that maybe we can't see all the blind spots. And so I think it's good to have those counselors there for you. So now you
Yeah.
have been, did you say about 4.5 years you have been on the solo RV lifestyle?
Yes, yes. And that was the other crazy thing, is I'm doing this on my own. I'm not doing
Hmm.
it with a husband or partner. I'm doing this on my own. And he and I talked about that a lot too. What does that look like? What does that mean if I break down? I don't know how to change a tire. I could, but you can't. You're not changing a 22.5 inch tire. I don't care who
Right,
you are. You're not
right.
changing that. So we talked a lot about that. And it's funny, all this has to deal with money, because changing a tire. Well, that comes down to, his suggestion was to have a very healthy RV maintenance pile of money. And
Hmm.
that's what I do have. So that if I do have, because when you have a breakdown in a 36-foot automobile or 36-foot vehicle, which is what I have,
Hmm.
it's not a $60 job. I mean, it's a 560, it's a 1,060. It's a hunk of money if you have a breakdown. So his good advice, which I follow to this day, is a healthy RV maintenance repair fund on the side.
So Jenell, that's such a wise thing. We always talk about having an emergency fund set aside whenever life happens. And so having that emergency fund for the RV maintenance, that's great counsel. And so I know probably with the size, probably the age of your RV and the size as far as the RV, there's probably different ways to figure out how much to have as far as in that healthy RV maintenance fund. And I know that we tell folks, hey, have 3 to 6 months of your monthly expenditures set aside for an emergency fund. Is there a similar way to help folks figure out how much they should have in that RV emergency fund?
Kind of, sort of. We went with that still 3 to 6 months. So we went with, like, for instance, I have 10 tires, 6 on my RV and 4 on my car. The first thing, everybody, you always have a flat. That's just the way it is. And with 10 tires, that's a high probability. And so the first thing he suggested I do is put enough money back to buy all 10 tires at once. Probably don't need that, but that was still kind of a 3 to 6 months, if you will, that using that kind of analogy, 1 tire or 10 tires. I had some leeway in there if I had to replace all of them at once. So that's the first thing that I did. Then we looked at what do oil changes cost. So I put aside 3 to 6 months on that, which is actually 3 to 6 years on that, because you get 1 or 2 a year. And then we put aside just a square amount of, $1,000, if you will, just for miscellaneous. This thing broke off, this hose broke, just so that I have that sitting aside and I don't feel any panic when something happens. I know, all right, there's money there, and I don't dip into that money for anything else. Just like our 3 to 6 months, I don't dip into that if, for going out to eat or buying a new shirt, just, like in normal life.
Right, right. So now all of a sudden, then you had that money set aside. How did you determine where you were going first?
Okay, good. That's everybody always wants to know that. That and how do I get my mail? I literally, my very first RV that I had, I took a map and rotated a paper map, and I literally rotated, shut my eyes, and put my finger on the map. And it landed, well, because, the whole world's open to me, the whole United States. So it landed on Maine. And I'm like, okay, Maine. So I looked and I'm like, I've always heard of Bar Harbor, Maine. I'm going to Bar Harbor. So I literally got in that first RV and drove from South Florida up to Bar Harbor, Maine, and spent the summer there. And it was great. And I'm like, I am home. This is what I love it here.
That is incredible. So then you were able to see Acadia while you're up there in Bar Harbor. That whole Bar Harbor is a beautiful place. That's a great spot to start with your first destination.
Yes. And then, so I spent the summer there, and I was still kind of nervous. I was still kind of nervous about my money. So an opportunity came up at that RV park I was staying in. It was a resort for part-time work in the office. I'm like, you know what? I'll take that. That was another way to reduce my expenses. I mean, it was $9 an hour. There's no money there, but it reduced my expenses. And that was my mindset. He and we changed my mindset I talked about earlier. Now my job is to reduce expenses, or my challenge, instead of adding to them. So at this resort, because I didn't know different then, so at this $3,000 a month resort, I was able to get it down to $1,500 by working in the office part-time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's a great way of walking through that. And
Yes.
so you went to Acadia or Bar Harbor. Now that was in the summertime. I'm sure you're not heading up north during the winter time. Is that right?
No, I don't do hot and I don't do cold. So after Bar Harbor, I came back to Florida, and now I have this wanderlust in me, and I'm like, I can do this. I know I can do this.
Sure.
Now I'm going to Alaska. So my very next place I went by myself from South Florida was to Skagway, Alaska.
Oh my goodness. So you covered the the 3 farthest corners the first trip. Southern Florida up to Maine, then back to Florida, then back to Alaska.
Yes. That's exactly what happened. I talk about the 20 months that I traveled full time, and that's pretty much was all that between staying in Bar Harbor and Alaska and going through Canada. And then on my way there, I went Florida, took a left, went up the California coast, and then on my way back, I came through Canada and through Montana, and then did the United States kind of catty-cornered eastbound.
Yeah. So you covered all that area. Did you ever get to a point in time where you said, I'm going to I have my wheels kind of sit still for a while and say, I know up there in Bar Harbor, you spent some time there for a summer, but have you now kind of gravitated towards staying in one location a little bit longer? or do you
No,
still travel quite a bit?
no, I will stay here and there. Like I just stayed the month of February in California at a resort that my travel group goes to. And it's just this beautiful resort in Nyland, California, in the middle of nowhere. But I stayed there for a month. But otherwise, no, I still pretty much, I'm fixing to start March 18th, a couple weeks from now, about a week from now that I look at the calendar. I'm going to start about a 6-month journey from Big Bend, Texas, all the way up to Iowa, to the Badlands, to Washington, Oregon for the summer, down the California coast, and it'll end me right back in Arizona. So that's it's going to be about 6 or 7 month trip there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So when you're looking at what places to go, do you focus on anything particular? You mentioned the Badlands, you mentioned a number of locations that have historical significance in our country, or do you look like at national parks, or is there any specific thing you're looking for whenever you're looking for locations to go to?
The first year, I did what everybody does. I knocked my bucket list off.
Uh,
Alaska, I wanted to see the Grand Canyon. Funny, I'd never seen the Grand Canyon. I've been to Europe 5 times and never seen the Grand Canyon. I've done Yellowstone. I did all those that first year, like everybody does.
yeah.
And then that second year, you're like, okay, well, now where is there to go? You're like, well, I've seen all the big things. Now I got to go find the world's largest ball of yarn. I can start seeing stuff like that. So what happened then is I met an RV group
Okay.
because I've been to Alaska by myself or Harvard. I've lived alone many years, so I'm fine. But I thought, hey, an RV club, what about that? So I went and joined them, and that really changed everything because they have certain trips, and that's why I'm going in March in Big Bend,
Mhm.
Texas. They have trips put together where you stay and where you can go for months and months. So I look at the trips that are offered and pick one of those.
Hmm.
So some of those trips are for things that are happening, they're interesting. For instance, the reason we're going to be in Texas is we're going to the solar eclipse that's coming up in April. And then from there, we're going to go from the solar eclipse to Dallas, Oklahoma, see the Oklahoma City Memorial. I've never seen that.
Hmm.
Then we're going to go to Pella, Iowa for a tulip festival. I've never been to a tulip festival in the United States,
Yeah.
so we're going to go there. So we try to see things because everybody in this art, not everybody, but the majority of people in this RV group are experienced and have already seen the Grand Canyon, for instance, and these
Mhm.
national parks. And so we like to see things that are happening around the country, the Balloon Festival, the Rose Bowl or the Rose Parade in California.
Mhm. So this RV club that you're part of, is this RV club, is it focused at a certain type of individual? Is there a certain common interest that they have? Or is it pretty much, hey, as long as we RV, then we're all good together, we'll set trips up and then head there? Or is it specific for a certain individual? Are these all
It
solo RV travelers or?
Yeah, that's what it is, John.
Yeah.
It's for solo RVers. And full transparency, I bought the club last March, a year ago this month, because I loved the club so much and wanted to see it grow and grow. And so I approached the owner and we, negotiated talked on and off for a year, but I bought the club last year. And it is for solo travelers. And like I said before, it's a very experienced group. And man, once I joined
Mm.
them, good Lord, did I learn how to do this life. I picked up so many tricks and tips. So now, before I was I don't want to use the word surviving because I was still
Yeah,
having a good life,
get
but
it. Yeah.
now I'm like totally thriving once I
Mm.
got with like minded people. So I always encourage new RVers, get with a travel club, get with an
Yeah.
RV club. You will learn so much. It'll take two
Wow.
years off your RV life
Yeah.
in a good way, in a good way, as far as like learning. What it'll take you 2 years to learn, you'll learn in 6 months hanging around a
Right.
group.
Yeah, I mean that's great counsel. So I think so oftentimes we get a little bit afraid to try new things. And if we
Mhm.
have some solo listeners, they're saying, "Hey, that sounds kind of big. I'd like to try it, but I don't know where to start. I don't know the different tips and tricks. I'm afraid I'm going to stub my toe too much." Getting with a travel club and connecting with you, Janelle, as far as on the, and so everybody knows in the show notes, we'll have some connections as far as the travel club, ways to connect with different people that are in this space and how to find more information from Janelle. But so check those out. But really great counsel to connect with other people and get with the travel club because you would learn so much and probably cut down your learning curve a little bit, I would have to think.
That's what I meant when I said it'll take 2 years off
Yeah.
your life. Yeah, it really does help that learning curve. Remember, when I found this club, I had already been RVing a couple of years. I know what to do. I know how to do it. Oh my gosh, I didn't know nothing. It just made it so much easier. I bought this RV once I decided I was gonna, go do this full time with the permission of my financial advisor, I must say. I really did. I called at the dealership. I'm like, all right, I'm doing this. And he's like, you don't have to keep telling me that. We've already talked about it. But what I got in this RV, and you remember again, I'd already had an RV. I couldn't figure out how to turn the hot water on in this RV. So I drove cross country to meet the RV club with no hot water. I'm in a fancy RV and I'm boiling water, pouring it in a milk jug, and showering with pouring water on me. And, but I get to the RV club and I'm like, anybody know how to turn the hot water on in my RV? Somebody with the same RV walked right over. Was like, here, it's this knob. It was just, I'm like, wow. I mean, and literally that one thing started my learning process, going from just surviving in my other RV to really thriving and living this life now in this RV. And that's one of the reasons I bought the club too. And especially for women who've retired or about to retire or want a different life or tired of looking out that same backyard, lovely though it may be. Man, why don't you look out at the backyard of Acadia National Park or Yellowstone or the Canadian Maritimes or Alaska we're going to this year or Baja we're going to in February or a tulip festival. How do you know about a tulip festival? I didn't until this club.
Yeah, yeah. And so, and that's incredible that you actually traveled across the country with cold water. And it's like, what do I do with it? But then you had the courage to ask somebody and say, hey, I don't know what I'm doing here with this hot water. Can you help me figure it out? So when I think about that, you probably learned so many tips and tricks. And I know you learned a lot from other people, but you probably also have your own list. Is there any, let's just say, unusual things or things that you've learned that you would say this might be really helpful to know? I think that one I was thinking of as far as even like I saw it as far as just looking at your bio that you decided to have one swimming suit so that you can kind of cut down on decision. But are there any other things that you think, this would be helpful to have? There's a little tip or trick that I found along the way.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So from that, not being able to turn on my hot water heater, I've learned how to change my own oil in my RV. Because it's like $199 to $300 to change. And I'm like, you know what? That's reducing expenses. I'm going to learn to change the oil. It's so easy. Oh my gosh. I learned to change my generator oil and filter. I had to put a new water pump on. I learned to do that. It was 2 screws. It was so easy. So I always tell people when you're first starting out is get some tools that are specific to the RV. Number one, buy a water pump. One of the RV members in the club had told me that. I'm like, well, I don't need that because my RV is new. But about a year later, I just got it and threw it in there. Sure enough, I'm sitting in Pennsylvania in a parking lot. My water pump goes out. I'm like, oh my God, I'm so glad I did that. But buy tools that are specific for the RV. One of them is a number 2 square screwdriver. That fits about every screw inside the RV. And as you're driving down the road in this rolling hurricane, you hear screws dropping out and you look on the floor. Well, there's a new screw on the ground that, and nobody tells you that stuff.
Right.
And you panic. But again, being around a like-minded group will show you things like that and tell you carry a water jug in full water jug at all times in your car or in your RV. Because if your water pump goes out, you may have 80 gallons of water, but you can't get to it. So always have a gallon of water there. So there's a ton of little things like that. There's tons of them. People always ask me about the money, though. That's a main thing that they ask about because they see the prices of new RVs and, it scares them off, and the interest rate, which when I bought was not high at all. My financial guy would have never allowed that. So it wasn't, but it's high now. But I don't as much now, but that first year or two, I wrote down every dime. And I encourage people when they're starting to think about this life, write down everything right now, no matter where you're living, write down every single thing you do right now, how much gas you spend, every event and attraction. Because we go to a lot of things that require entrance fees, museums, the Tulip Festival, et cetera, et cetera. And that adds up quicker than you think. In a normal life in a sticks and bricks, you may go to a museum, once a month or something that costs once a month or so, movies, let's say. But in this life, we go and do a lot of things. So I always encourage people the last month or 2 months of as you're getting ready to do this life, write down what you spend and everything that'll drop off. And then you can add like the cost of gas. You can add that
Mm.
to your expenses.
Yeah, I love that because you're right. So many people are probably wondering, wow, it's got to be expensive to live this lifestyle. And so going back, there's a lot of things you wouldn't think of as far as spending. And so just those little things that you're doing while you're traveling around, that's great, great counsel.
It is. And then, like, we know the best state for you to have your address in, live in, if you will. Some state, as far as like your insurance on your car and RV, we can help you with that. The club helped me on where to have my RV and car registered. It helped on my taxes and it helped on my insurance. And I don't have to have my car and RV inspected once a year. I had them registered in Texas and you had to have them inspected once a year. Well, I don't want it. I'm not in Texas once a year. So I was like, okay, that's a rookie mistake. So
Yeah.
all those kind of things is what a club does for you and experience. How I RV now looks nothing like the first year. Oh my gosh. That first year I only stayed in RV resorts because I was scared of the lower end RV parks. Now I hardly ever stay in an RV park. I don't have to. I'd rather stay in the middle of the mountains or the middle of the forest or the woods. And I invested about 10 grand in solar for my RV. And it's a big hunk to put out, but I probably saved 25, in park fees. So that's a great, and we would help you. An RV club, I didn't know to do that. And an RV club helped me with that.
Yeah. And so you just mentioned, staying as far as out in the mountains and staying in
Mm-hmm.
different areas that are more remote. And I'm just sitting here thinking, how does a person then walk through like loneliness or
Okay.
anxiety? Is that a big issue? Is that a big struggle for a lot of folks?
It is. It is. Especially, I'll go to the women. For me, for sure, the anxiety of the unknown. We all think we're flexible and like to be flexible and all this. Well, flexibility rears its head when things are going wrong, usually. And then
Mm,
it's like, how flexible? It's easy to be flexible when life is good. So the anxiety of this and the fear of the unknown and the ability to be flexible and patient is very tested. And I keep going back to a club, but if you join a club, the anxiety and the loneliness is not there. I've lived on my own many, many years and I'm completely fine. But, even me, I'd like to go to dinner every once in a while with somebody or go, to the fair or the tulip festival with people.
yeah.
And so when you have a club, you can come in and out as you choose and you get as much as people as you want and then, go away again.
Mm,
But that's cited as the number one fear of people getting an RV and traveling is the anxiety and maybe not loneliness, but being on your own so much.
sure,
Yes.
sure. There has to be a big, especially initially, to
Yeah,
kind of work through that. And I'm sure over time, you start to get more used to some of that solitude. And then you
you
figure
do.
out ways to start to navigate relationship a little bit differently. And, you had mentioned registration as far as of your RV. All of a sudden, I was thinking, well, if you register in a different state, what state do you declare as your residence? How do you get your mail?
Okay.
Things like that.
Yeah, people always ask that. I'm a resident of South Dakota.
Okay.
Technically. All right. I was born and raised in Houston, lived in Florida my whole life. All right.
Mhm.
So the other RVers said, no, you need to. My address could be anywhere. I just had it at my sister's for a while in Houston, and then I had it at my daughter's house in Florida for a while. So as long as you don't have another home somewhere, right? That's get you in trouble with the IRS. And if
Hmm.
they're listening, I'm doing this legally. So just in case. But no, I could be anywhere because I don't have a permanent address. So
Okay.
I learned from the other RVers, South Dakota, Montana, those are great states for us. There's no sales tax. The insurance for the car and the RV was way cheaper
Mm,
than in Houston, Texas,
sure.
or Fort Worth, Texas, or Florida, South Florida, Miami, Florida.
Oh, yeah.
So, and I have a mail service there, and that's where I get my mail. But as I always tell people that call and ask about this, like, you don't get mail anymore. Who really gets mail? You get mail from a bill that you missed. You went to the dentist and the copay came through or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
And then
Yep.
you get mail from the government sending you, I get mail that I ran a toll and didn't pay for it. I get
Mm,
that. That's
hmm.
what in our RV world, that's the real mail that we get. And you
Yeah.
just get a mail service.
Yeah.
It's no big deal.
Yeah, yeah, that's excellent. I would never have thought about what, as far as what the state where your
Yeah.
residency is and all that. So that makes a lot of sense. You've mentioned a number of times now the RV club that you
Yes.
purchased and everything. Do you guys have a website for that, Janelle, or is there a way that folks can get in contact with you?
We do. It's called Wandering Individuals Network, or WINS. We, acronym for that. The title that just flows off your tongue. Wandering Individuals Network. It's a 36-year-old club for solo
Uh-huh.
travelers. I didn't come up with it at all. It's had thousands of members over the years, and I'm sure you'll have it in the show notes, but we do have a website, Facebook, and I encourage your readers to come on there, look at our website. Every picture on the website, with a couple of obvious exceptions, are from members. All the pictures are from members of things we've actually
Hmm.
done, and it's got a bunch of trips on there that we're fixing to do. Because, like I said, we don't do winter or summer.
Mhm.
So everything for summer's posted up there, and winter's starting to get posted too.
Yeah, yeah. Great. So that's the Wandering Individual Network, Individuals
Individuals.
network.com. And so a
Correct.
phenomenal resource, folks, great blog on there. And so a lot of great information. I encourage you, if you're just kind of like, well, that's kind of interesting. I might have to check that out. And just so you know, John, I had a meeting just this last week, a single client, and she was actually talking about wanting to head out and travel in an RV. But she had a lot of the questions we walked through today. So
Mhm.
this is a great resource for folks to actually look into. And actually, goodness gracious, we're at 31 minutes already, Janelle. And so, kind of in closing, is there anything that we've not talked about yet that you think, hey, this would be great information or something for folks to realize or know?
If they go on that website, every contact us or email us comes back to me. I'm the
Okay.
sole owner and worker and chief bottle washer. So I'm glad to talk to any of them. I give everybody my phone number as well, so they can call
Yeah.
and talk to me. But I would like to end with John telling people this is a viable way to have a life. This is a fulfilling life.
Mm.
This is it can be an economical life. And so I talk to your financial advisor. I've said that in other podcasts too. It's not just because I'm talking to you, but as you get older, you can't make money like you used to, or for the most part, you can't go out and
Yeah.
work 60 hours and make that money. So talk to your financial advisor and see if this is a viable way of life for you.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. Janelle, I want to tell you, first of all, thank you so much for being on the show. You've
Thank
educated
you.
me so much. I'll tell you, my learning curve, mentioned that before, is very steep on this lifestyle, and you have helped me greatly. So thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, and thanks for spending time with us. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, John.
Yep. Everybody else, thank you so much for listening. Great decisions, incredible lives. Look forward to chatting with you again next week. Talk to y'all later. Bye-bye.
Thank you again for listening to the Great Decisions, Incredible Lives, Retire with Intention podcast with host John Creekmer. Follow us on social media, visit our website, and join our community of like-minded individuals redefining retirement and living incredible lives. Please leave us a review and share our podcast with others who may benefit. We wish you a future filled with purpose, fulfillment, and the joy of living your incredible life in retirement.